Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the MLB Strategy Show. Do me a favor as you come in, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, because I'm going to be breaking down a 12-game slate with my buddy Matt LaMarca. We're sponsored by Prize Picks today. And oh boy, I see chat is off to a rousing start to open the day, because I open up the YouTube chat. First thing I see is somebody taking victory laps for saying the Dodgers are no good, which I don't know. It seems like an odd thing to victory lap, because the Dodgers. What's the Dodgers record right now?
It's amongst the best in baseball.
Yeah, the Dodgers are 19-8, which is the best record in the National League. The only team with a better record in all of baseball is the Yankees at 20-8. They're fine. All right. I don't know. I don't think anybody was expecting to go 162-0, but they're pretty good. It's best record in the National League, second best record in all of baseball, back by only half a game. Nothing to sneeze at. They're doing just fine. They're looking good for themselves. On pace to win well over 100 games. The Dodgers are playing well this year. But that aside, it doesn't matter. They're not on today's slate, at least not the main slate. We've got a 12-game slate. The Dodgers are not one of the teams that are on here, Matt. But how are you feeling about tonight's 12-gamer?
It's a pretty nice little slate here. Some interesting pitching options to talk about. Justin Verlander is the most expensive guy. How do you feel about him? I think is going to be a big factor on this slate. But yeah, overall, should be a good one.
Yeah, and once again, 12 games. So let's just get right into it, start breaking them down. And the first game we would talk about, unfortunately, we don't actually have a betting line, nor do we have a confirmed starting pitcher for the Mets. Mets are on the road against the Washington Nationals. Now, one thing I've noticed when I write down the stats for all of these pitchers, when I'm going game by game and preparing the run sheet, all of the pitchers' numbers look almost incredible. Like almost across the board, every pitcher's numbers look incredible this year. But we did find one guy on today's slate who has less than great looking numbers. That's Patrick Corbin, one of the only pitchers that's really struggling. He has a 4.88 expected ERA, 19.3% K rate. Just kind of eyeballing the pitchers on today's slate, we've got like 4 guys that have an expected ERA over like 3.5 or so. It's really hard to find poor pitchers. Corbin has certainly been one of them. As a result, I think the Mets are going to want to be a team that we're going to want to get to. On the other side, I have Carlos Carrasco listed as the probable pitcher for the Mets, although he hasn't been confirmed as the starter. So for right now, just focusing on the Mets matchup against Patrick Corbin. Hard to not like this spot. No, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that this Mets offense is probably a bit overvalued at the moment. You look at like all of their Statcast data, and it's not good. They are in the bottom 10% of the league in hard hit rate and average exit velocity. They just have not had a ton of power this season. And the Mets are also a team that tends to play better against right-handed pitchers than left-handed pitchers. Right now, they're 21st in the league in WRC plus against southpaws. Corbin is a matchup that they can find some success in for sure. But if they're going to be like a chalk offense tonight, I will probably be looking elsewhere.
Yeah, so at least as it stands right now, there is no real chalk offense on the slate. It's a big slate. There's a lot of teams to choose from. The most popular offense of the day right now is the Miami Marlins against Madison Bumgarner and the Arizona Diamondbacks. The Mets are picking up some ownership here at 11.2%, but it doesn't really seem to be problematic when you consider that the Mets have an 11.3% top stack odds. So this is the team with the best top stack odds on the slate. They're popular, but not the most popular team of the day. It's going to be hard for me to not prioritize the Mets, mostly because of what I said before. With the state of pitching right now in baseball and how low scoring all the games are, all of the pitchers look good. It does. Patrick Corbin sucks so hard though that it doesn't matter. Like you could de-juice the baseball as much as you want. You could have the hitters trying to hit, like a boulder. It doesn't matter. He can't throw strikes. He's not getting guys out. So I'm still going to be looking to stack the Mets in this spot. You see maybe a little bit lower on them, but relative to the slate, it's a team you have to have some interest in, right?
Yes, agreed. And like you said, the top stack percentage is the highest in our tool. I just am a little bit concerned about the overall upside of this offense, just because they don't have a lot of guys who are hitting the ball well at the moment, right? I mean, Pete Alonso's going yard. He had 2 homers in his last game, but the rest of that lineup, there's not a lot that you look at and say, okay, I feel pretty confident that this guy has home run potential on this slate.
And then on the other side, we don't have a confirmed starter for the Mets. That's the reason that there is no betting line for the game right now. Carlos Carrasco is the guy who I think is most likely to start, although once again, not yet confirmed. And part of the reason, just because the Mets have had so many cancellations lately that it kind of screws up the entire rotation. But at least from what we've seen of Carrasco this year, 3.04 expected ERA, 23.1% K rate. He's been solid. He's older at this point. He's dealt with a whole number of injuries. But here's the key to me when it comes to Carlos Carrasco. He's still throwing 93.2 miles per hour. It's not like we've seen his velocity dip all the way to 91 or 90 or anything like that. Considering the stuff still appears to be intact and he's pitching fairly well, I think he's an okay option against the Nationals. Not one of my favorite on the slate or anything, but I'm not looking to stack against him. I think he's a pitcher that it warrants some exposure to. How do you view Carrasco?
Yeah, I feel pretty similarly. The strikeout upside isn't elite anymore. He's at 8.4 Ks per 9 inning this season. He was a guy who was closer to 11 in his prime. So he's not the same pitcher that he was, but he's still getting the job done. This Nationals offense is one of the weaker in baseball. So I think you can have some interest in him for sure. But I don't think that he is a priority target for me at 8,700.
All right, let's move on to the next game, the Toronto Blue Jays against the New York Yankees. I mentioned that there's not that many starting pitchers that have poor numbers this year that are pitching tonight. We've got another one in this game, though, and it's in a brutal spot. Yusei Kikuchi on the mound against the Yankees. Kikuchi's numbers this year, 5.27 expected ERA, 21.5% K rate. I don't understand how the Yankees aren't more popular on this slate in this spot. The Yankees are projected for 3.6% ownership as a team. Considering how much power is in this offense and how much Kikuchi has struggled this year and has really always struggled against right-handed power bats, tell me why this is not a great spot for the Yankees.
I can't. My only concern, or the only reason I would imagine that their ownership might be a smidge down, is just because the total on this game is pretty mediocre. It's at 7.5 runs. So maybe that's what's scaring some folks away. But I have no problems loading up on the Yankees in this spot. I mean, I've talked about the Yankees a lot when I've been on these shows. Their StatCast data is just insanely good this season. They have a 48.5% hard hit rate this season. No one else is above 44.7. So they're just making such better contact than every other team in baseball. They have so much power. I mean, especially against left-handed pitchers, you can look at guys like Giancarlo Stanton, Josh Donaldson, like there's just a host of different ways you can go with this team. So for sure, one of my favorite offenses of the day.
Yeah, same, especially if the ownership is going to remain this low. If we're actually going to get the Yankees at 3% ownership against a starting pitcher that has just not been good, and the Yankees' strengths play really well into his weaknesses, I mean, this is certainly a team to be overweight to. Now, on the other side, we have Luis Severino is going to be starting for the Yankees. Now, Severino didn't pitch much at all the last couple of years due to a variety of different injuries. Now, this year, a couple of things. Number one, his numbers look pretty good from peripheral sense, 2.87 expected ERA, 22.3% K rate. But here's the other thing too. And this was key to me when I'm looking at Severino to open the season. What does his velocity look like? And so far, the answer is very good. 96.7 average fastball velocity. Despite all the injuries, Severino is still one of the hardest throwing starting pitchers in all of baseball. And then also you start to look at like, all right, how deep have the Yankees let him work into games? And it hasn't been crazy deep, but 5 innings last start, 6 innings, 2 starts before that. So he does appear to be pretty stretched out at this point. The one holdup here is obviously the matchup against the Toronto Blue Jays. So I'm not really looking to roster Severino against Toronto heavily, but at 7,900 on DK, I think he's a worthy SP2. On FanDuel at 7,700. I don't want to play him on a single pitcher site, but it's Severino somebody you have any interest in at a cheap price as an SP2, considering some of the success he's had so far?
Yeah, some interest, minimal interest, but interest is there. I mean, the strikeout numbers again are down. That's kind of a trend for a lot of pitchers in baseball this season, but Severino has been one of the best strikeout arms in the league when he's been healthy in the past. He's at 8.63 this year. That's really not optimal for a fantasy starting pitcher, but the rest of his numbers look really good. The length is still a slight concern. I would say 6 innings is probably his absolute ceiling. I doubt that he gets any deeper than that, which also kind of caps his upside, but 7,900 is a fine price tag for him. And this Blue Jays offense, while the top half is extremely tough, the bottom half is exploitable. So I think Severino is okay as an SP2 today.
Yeah, and I think we're kind of on the same page with that. And then as for the Blue Jays offense, let's see, where are they in projected ownership right now? Because this is always, and I know people have heard me make this point a bunch of times now. If we get an offense like the Yankees, the Dodgers, the Blue Jays for low ownership, I'm willing to go after it kind of regardless of what the matchup is. The Toronto Blue Jays today, 0.6% projected ownership as a team. Is this the best spot on the board? Far from it. But considering the firepower in the Blue Jays offense, it's hard for me to not like them as a contrarian stack when literally nobody's playing them as of now.
Yeah, absolutely. They are expensive, right? They're a little bit pricey for a matchup against someone like Severino, but you have to have interest in guys like Vlad Guerrero and Bo Bichette, George Springer when they're checking in with virtually no ownership.
Yeah, and once again, if we see the ownership share go up on them at all, then I'll be like, okay, I don't really want to play the Toronto Blue Jays offense against Luis Severino. But if we're actually going to be getting sub 1% ownership, it's a good contrarian stack on a larger slate because the Blue Jays offense, there's a ton of upside there in pretty much any spot. Moving on to the next game, Boston Red Sox, Atlanta Braves. Now, talking about pitchers that had a lot of success so far this year, we've got 2 of them in this spot. Kyle Wright on the mound for Atlanta, 30.6% K rate, 2.49 expected ERA. Garrett Whitlock for Boston, 35.8% K rate and a 1.81 expected ERA. Now, Kyle Wright was formerly one of the top pitching prospects in baseball, and it sucked for his entire career up until now. So here's the question I have for you, Matt. How much do you buy into the success we've seen from Kyle Wright to this point?
I buy it to an extent. I don't buy it as he's now like an ace caliber pitcher, but Kyle Wright, like you said, was a solid prospect. He's had, decent strikeout stuff throughout his career. He has really taken a step forward this season. I expect some regression, specifically from the home run department. He has gone from 2.84 homers per 9 innings last season, albeit over just 6 innings, but he has cut his number from 1.4 for his career to 0.29 this season. Part of that is probably due to the baseball, but I would expect some regression, especially as we get hotter here. As the weather heats up, typically the ball starts flying a bit more. But other than that, his results don't seem overly fluky, right? He has a 300 BABIP. So it's not like he's relying on, good luck when the ball is put in play. He's really done it with good strikeout numbers, average batted ball luck, and keeping the ball in the ballpark. So I don't think there's reason to expect too much regression from him, but do I expect him to pitch to a sub-2 ERA all year? No.
Yeah, I mean, that's for sure. He's a 1.74 ERA. That part's not going to uphold, but it's more so like who is this dude? Because last year in the limited innings he pitched, he had a 9.95 ERA and 11.61 expected ERA. Now he's one of the best pitchers in all of baseball. I tend to think he's closer to this year than what we saw last year. And something else that's nice is we could point to tangible changes. Whenever somebody's just producing better results in a small sample size and nothing has changed, it's hard for me to really buy into it. But last year, 93.7 mile per hour average fastball velocity for Kyle Wright. This year, 95.4. So he's throwing a lot harder. Also, if you look at the pitches he's throwing, totally different this year compared to previous years. The big difference is he's dropped his slider and in places throwing a curveball now. So throughout his entire career, we've seen him as a guy who uses his slider 25 to 30% of the time. This year, 6% of the time. He's had a curveball in the past, but he's generally only thrown it like 12, 13, 14% of the time. This year so far, 33%. So a couple of tangible changes that I could look at when it comes to Kyle Wright. Throwing harder and has dumped his slider in place of a curveball. And this seems to be adding to better and newfound success for Kyle Wright. So with that in mind, I think he's a decent pay up to be contrarian option. He's only projected for 5% ownership right now. We do him with a 16% chance to be one of the top two pitchers on the slate. I know the matchup isn't ideal against Boston, although Boston has struggled a little bit to start the year.
I think it's a fine matchup. I think it's a fine matchup. You look at the Red Sox right now. They are bottom 6 in terms of xWOBA this season. So they're just not hitting the ball, right? Their big free agent acquisition, Trevor Story, has been terrible. I think it's totally a viable spot to pay up for Kyle Wright. I will have a good handful of exposure to him, especially if the projected ownership doesn't increase drastically before lock here. We have him as easily the most positively leveraged pitcher on today's slate.
Yeah, and for reference also, when you look at some of the other payoff options, and we've Kyle Wright projected just as well as any other pitcher going today. So he's right there in terms of projection with Verlander, with Nola, with Robbie Ray, with Lucas Giolito. But Kyle Wright's projected for 5% ownership. We've got 30% for Verlander, 30% for Nola, 30% for Ray, 15% for Giolito. So all that considered, Kyle Wright does look to be a solid contrarian option. And yeah, the Red Sox offense has certainly struggled so far to open up the year. But now on the other side, Garrett Whitlock, he's also seen a lot of success in the limited amount of time he's been on mound. 35.8% K rate, 1.81 expected ERA, 0.69 whip. So Garrett Whitlock, another guy who's a young starting pitcher who's fairly well regarded. Also another guy projected for no ownership today, 1% on DraftKings right now is his ownership projection. Is he somebody you'd be looking at as a contrarian SP2 and maybe a pivot off of somebody like a Luis Severino?
Yes, absolutely. I think this guy's a stud. He has actually been slightly better since moving to the starting rotation. So as a starter, he's got a K rate of over 39%. His FIP as a starter is 1.66, his XFIP 1.68. He's been filthy. So, the one real concern, kind of similar to Severino, is I don't know how deep into this game he will get. As a guy who spent the early part of the year as a reliever, he's probably capped at like 5-6 innings. He went 5 in his last start. That was his season high. But he can do a lot of damage in 5 innings. The matchup is not good. The Braves have a great offense, but I think this guy is talented enough to get through this matchup. I will be happy to take some stabs on him at 1% ownership.
And to your other point also about him going 5 innings and potential workload concerns, The reason he was even able to make it 5 innings the last start is because he pitched 5 flawless innings. Like, he was nearly perfect. He still only threw 78 pitches, so I don't imagine he's going to be especially stretched out. But we'll see. If we get word that he's going to be allowed to throw upwards of like 90 pitches in this spot, then certainly it's easy to see where there'd be some upside. Considering the success from both these pitchers to this point, do you have any interest in the offenses?
I think I might have a hair of interest for the Braves, just because I do think that their offense has been so good this year that I think, especially once they get past Whitlock, they can do some damage against the Sox bullpen. But the Braves, just even though their team results have been down, they're still making excellent contact. We know all about, most of these guys that are in this lineup, that they can all play. So the Braves would be the team for me.
You guys want access to Awesemo Plus tools for basically every single DFS sport out there, you can sign up for an Awesemo Plus weekly pass for $29.95. And if you're only looking for an MLB package, we do have cheaper ones that are available for as low as $18.95. So once again, get access to all the tools we have behind the paywall, things that I wouldn't be able to build my MLB lineups without. Stop guessing, start winning. Join Awesemo Plus today. Moving on to the next game here on the slate, it is the Houston Astros against the Minnesota Twins. Correct me if you've heard this one before, but two really, really good starting pitchers on the mound in this spot, where we have Justin Verlander on the mound for Houston. And then on the other side of the game, it is Joe Ryan for the Minnesota Twins. Joe Ryan has been one of the best rookie pitchers in all of baseball. So just reading off the numbers for both these guys, they are crazy similar. Strikeout rate for Justin Verlander, 26.3%. Strikeout rate for Joe Ryan, 26.4%. Expected ERA for Verlander, 2.89, 2.93 for Ryan, and then the whip, 0.7 for Verlander, 0.83 for Joe Ryan. So we've got a couple of question marks with both these pitchers. First, for Joe Ryan, we just haven't seen him pitch very much at the big league level. And then as it goes for Justin Verlander, he's super old. He's coming off of Tommy John surgery, and I don't think any of us expected that he would be the betting leader to win the AL Cy Young a month into the season. But that's where we are. So based on what we've seen from these guys to this point, how much do you buy into each of their all of their early season successes?
Yeah, I think both guys are regression candidates. I mean, Verlander, his numbers are kind of similar to his 2019 numbers from a batted ball perspective, right? In 2019, Verlander limited opponents to a 218 BABIP, which in my head seemed crazy at the time. This season, he's been even better. He's down to 192 batting average on balls in play, which is just absurdly good. The big difference is Verlander was striking out more than 12 batters per 9 innings in 2019, and he's down to 8.5 this season. So I think he's a very good pitcher. Don't get me wrong, but I don't know if he is necessarily a bona fide stud like like his ERA suggests. So I'll probably be underweight on Verlander today. We have him as pretty negatively leveraged. I think, like you look at him next to a guy like Kyle Wright. I would rather take shots with Kyle Wright for slightly lower, given the strikeout differential. And especially since the Twins offense has shown some ability so far this season.
Yeah, it's a Twins offense that I think was certainly overlooked to start the season, because I know I have a bet on the Twins to win the Central Division at plus 650. And now I don't know if they've moved to the betting favorite, but at the very least, I think they should be favored when you consider the White Sox have struggled. The White Sox bullpen hasn't looked as good as expected, and the White Sox dealt with a number of injuries this year. And I think all those things add up to the Twins being a team that I think, once again, should be the betting favorite to win their division this year. And then here's how I view the pitchers in this spot. I like both these offenses for real life. For these particular matchups, I don't really want to roster them. But at the same time, too, like Justin Verlander, I'm not going to call him an outright fade. But like you, I tend to want to be underweight to him. And there's other pitchers in the same price range that I'd rather get to, or at least similar upside. Like I think Aaron Nola and Robbie Ray have comparable upside to Justin Verlander, but I could play each of them for $1,500 and $2,000 less. So I'd rather roster them for the salary savings than Verlander. And then Verlander is also just super popular, as it goes for Joe Ryan. It's the Houston Astros offense. It's a really good offense. I don't generally want to roster pitchers against them. So I don't want to play either of the offenses because I think the pitchers are too good, but I don't want to play either of the pitchers because I think the offenses are too good. So I think this game is more of a write-off for me. Once again, won't be a total fade on Verlander, but I'm going to be underweight. Do you like either of the offenses?
Yeah, no, not really.
All right, so we're on the same page then. And let's move on over to the Baltimore Orioles against the St. Louis Cardinals. And for this game, there was no betting line. And at least when I looked earlier this morning, there was no listed starting pitchers. I'm going to look really quick to see if that's changed. So here's the issue we had in this game. It's actually going to be Kyle Bradish on the mound for Baltimore. So I'll write that down. But then for St. Louis, I think this was supposed to be Adam Wainwright's scheduled turn to start, but he's on the COVID list. So it's really hard to know what to make of this matchup because we don't know who the starting pitcher is for St. Louis. Could be Adam Wainwright, but it's pending a negative COVID test, which we don't know if that's going to be the case or not at this point in time. But until then, let's talk about Kyle Bradish, and I'll pull up his numbers because he was not confirmed when I looked earlier. But off the top of my head, he has not been good this year. And yeah, 25 years old, Kyle Bradish, an unranked prospect coming into the year. He's only pitched 10 innings at the big league level. It hasn't gone well for him to this point. 5.4 ERA, 6.17 expected ERA. In terms of his projections, Zip's projection for a 5.11 ERA this year, which that is not optimal. The only thing I could say that does go well for him is that this is a very right-hand dominant St. Louis Cardinals lineup, and Bradish is a right-hand pitcher. But what do you make of the matchup that Bradish has against St. Louis?
Yeah, I'm not going to be playing Bradish. The question I think is just how much interest do you have in the Cardinals? They are grading out as one of the most popular offenses today. And we do give them a reasonable chance at being the top stack. I just have concerns about loading up on a team that has been as bad as the Cardinals have been this season. I mean, they are dead last in hard hit rate, dead last in average exit velocity. They're at the bottom 3% of the league in X slug, bottom 7% in X WOBA. They're just not a good hitting team, at least at the moment. And while Bradish has struggled in his brief major league tenure, I think it might be too early to say this guy stinks, right? He wasn't a top 100 prospect, but he's a 45 plus future value guy. He was the Orioles' 7th ranked prospect by Fangraphs. He dominated in AAA. So I think Bradish, he might not be a gas can is what I'm getting at. Like, I don't think I'm confident enough in this disaster of a Cardinals offense to load up against them, or to load up on anyone, against any starting pitcher at this point, and certainly not someone that we just don't have enough information on.
So it doesn't matter for today, but I like rostering St. Louis against left-handed pitching. They actually are first in baseball in WRC plus against lefties. But to your point, they've sucked against right-hand pitching so far. The advanced numbers aren't any good. If you look at the actual numbers, they have a 93 WRC plus against right-hand pitching. That's also with an inflated BABIP, which is going to come down a little bit. But yeah, I think overall we look at the St. Louis Cardinals, and just a team that I'm generally not going to want to target against right-hand pitching is Kyle Bradish. Maybe not a big league caliber starting pitcher going forward, perhaps. But once again, this team is so popular, projected for 12.1% ownership over on DraftKings. That makes them the second most popular offense on the slate, only behind the Miami Marlins. And then over on FanDuel, we have them checking in at 11% ownership, that's also the second most popular team on the slate. So I'm going to be looking elsewhere because this is a very popular Cardinals team that just doesn't hit right-hand pitching well. As for the other side of the game, I mean, what can we say? We need to know who's starting for the Cardinals. Here's one thing, though. Regardless of who's starting, I'm probably not going to like the Orioles offense.
I think that's fair to say.
All right, so let's move on. And then once again, like this video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Check out MLB Live before lock later in the day, because then those guys will have a better idea of who's actually going to be starting in this game for the Cardinals. Adam Wainwright's probably the best guess, but once again, it's pending a negative COVID test. The next spot we have to talk about is the Kansas City Royals against the Texas Rangers. And on paper, these are two not good starting pitchers, Brad Keller and Martin Perez. But guess what, Matt? They've had success this year, because who hasn't had success this year as a starting pitcher? Brad Keller is a 3 expected ERA. Martin Perez is a 2.69 expected ERA, but neither of them generate strikeouts. Brad Keller 16.5% K rate, Martin Perez 18.3%. I understand these guys are having success at preventing runs, but I don't want to play either of them in DFS. Do you?
No, I will say that I'm more inclined to stack against Keller than I am against Perez. He's somebody who has been like a ground ball machine, not necessarily in recent years, but the ground ball rate is back up again this season. And he's just he's good at keeping the ball in the ballpark. Brad Keller, I think, might be a bit more vulnerable in that department. Although he does have pretty good home run per nine numbers for his career. But I think that this spot just seems kind of ugly to me all around. I think these are pitchers that are ground ball guys. I think that so I don't have a ton of interest in the offense, but I don't have a ton of interest in the pitchers for fantasy either.
And then the other key here is these are two somewhat popular offenses as well. These are two of the more negatively leveraged teams we have on the slate. Texas projected for 7% ownership. Kansas City projected for 7% ownership, and these teams have a 5% and 4% chance, respectively, to be the top stacks on the slate. So if this was a spot where we're looking at these pitchers and being like, hey, historically not great pitchers, maybe they're facing regression, sure, but that's kind of what the field is already doing. So I think there's other spots I'd prefer to get to. So this is a game that I think we could largely write off. There's no real interest in me from the pitchers or the offenses, and it appears you're on the same page.
Yep.
All right, so let's hit up the next spot, the White Sox against the Cleveland Guardians. And now let's start by talking about Lucas Giolito, who I view as one of the best pitching options on the slate going against Cleveland. I understand Cleveland's offense has performed better than a lot of us would have thought coming into the year, but long-term, I just don't think this is a dangerous offense outside of Jose Ramirez, maybe Franmil Reyes as well when he gets going, but Franmil Reyes more of a strong hitter against left-hand pitching than righties. And as for Giolito so far this year, he is striking out everybody, 40.5% K rate. And of course, the other numbers always looking good for him, 3.29 expected ERA. Considering how weak I think this Cleveland offense could be going forward in the strikeout upside of Giolito, I don't understand how he's not more popular on this slate. We've got Robbie Ray, Aaron Nola, Justin Verlander, all picking up about double the ownership of Lucas Giolito. I think he's going overlooked in this spot. How do you think about him?
It's weird, right? You look at Giolito's numbers and it's like he's still playing in the juiced ball, sticky substance era, right? He's racking up Ks. He's giving up homers. He's doing everything that every other pitcher seems to be struggling at this season. So I agree. You look at that K9 and you're like, man, this guy, the upside is very real here. And I'm not a huge believer in the Guardians' success offensively. I do think that their philosophy makes them a team you want to avoid often in DFS because they are really prioritizing just putting the ball in play. They have the lowest strikeout rate in the league against right-handed pitching, but against Giolito, I don't think that's as big of a concern because he's just striking out everybody. So I like him. I think he's a strong play. I think Kyle Wright probably gets the edge for me just between the two, just from matchup purposes, but definitely have no problem with Giolito today.
Yeah, and then if you look at Cleveland, they have a 3.2 implied team total, which is the lowest on the slate. So they're not expected to score runs. Giolito is generating most of his outs via strikeouts this year. Once again, 40.4% K rate. So Giolito, very high priority tournament pitcher for me. Now on the other side of the game, one of the rare pitchers this year who has not been able to find success in the new dead ball era, Cal Quantrill, who just absolutely sucks. He's a 4.8% K rate this year. Also 4.94 expected ERA. Quantrill has never been particularly good. And then was also a guy who, even when he had a little bit of success, he was throwing really limited pitches. So I look at Quantrill as a guy that I don't really like. Some people might just look at the ERA and be like, well, he's a 3.54 ERA this year. Sure, but the strikeout rate is 14.8%. The walk rate is 13%. So he's walking nearly as many guys as he's striking out. He's a 222 BABIP. He has a 65.5% strand rate. So he is getting lucky in just every single sense possible. I don't buy into it going forward. I think he's probably likely to be a guy with a mid to high fours ERA. The White Sox offense, I also think, is a potent one. So not that many teams that I view as being in good spots tonight against starting pitchers. The White Sox are one of them. I like getting to Chicago's offense. Is this a team that you're going to be looking to stack?
Yeah, one of my favorite offenses of the day. The White Sox have really struggled to start the year against right-handed pitching. They're 26th in WRC plus, but I think this is a great breakout spot for them. you look at their StatCast numbers, they're still making pretty good contact. They're in the top 7% of the league in terms of hard hit rate. So there should be better days coming for the White Sox. And I think Quantrill, just such a major regression candidate. Because normally you look at a guy with a low canine that is having success and you think that it's because he's generating ground balls, and he's got a 36% ground ball rate this year. So tons of fly balls against him, but with the baseball, they're just not traveling. I don't expect that to continue all year. Certainly, I think he's due for regression with his 222 BABIP. I think this is a great spot for the White Sox.
Yep, I think we are on the same page with that one. And then something else to note when it comes to this team, Yohan Moncada is back. That's a little bit of a boost to this offense. Moncada at one point was one of the top hitting prospects in all of baseball. He's had a really up and down career to this point. 2017, 105 WRC plus. In 2018, he was at 97. Then 2019, it looked like he broke out with a 139 WRC plus. Then he had 95 WRC plus the year after that. So I'm not exactly sure what Yohan Moncada is long-term, but he's still only 26 years old because he came over to the U.S. like when he was 17 or something like that. Super maybe young, but younger. Yeah. So, I mean, he's somebody who I think has potential to have a really good year. Zips does have him projected for a 118 WRC plus. So that would make him, one of the better hitting third baseman in baseball. So I think Moncada for sure is something that should increase the productivity of the White Sox offense going forward. Let's move on to the next game here. Tampa Bay Rays, Los Angeles Angels. I don't know if Jordan Klein is still in the chat, but I know he's an Angels fan who has been very happy with what he's seen from the Angels so far this year. And, one thing that's been a little surprising about them is that their offense has found a lot of success, even though Shohei Ohtani has not been particularly good as a hitter this year. We've seen the power upside, which is always going to be there when it comes to Ohtani. But overall this year, we have seen him struggle relative to last year. Anyway, last year as the MVP at a 152 WRC plus, this year he's at 124. The real biggest difference is a massive decline in walk rate. So last year he had a 372 on base percentage, this year at 315. So I didn't really buy into the success of Ohtani's year last year in terms of him being one of the best hitters in baseball. I still think he's a very good hitter, but I think he's going to be better pitching this year than he was last year and probably a little bit worse as a hitter. But that aside, this is an offense that I think does have a lot of upside in it, especially because we're starting to see life from some of the young hitters. Like Joe Adell has showed some upside this year, Brandon Marsh, and Rendon is healthy, Trout is healthy. So top to bottom, this could be a pretty stellar offense. And I know that Corey Kluber has been solid this year, 3.87 expected ERA, 23.8% K rate. I'm still willing to get to this Angels offense, though, just because of the upside I think is in it. As long as they're healthy, I like the Angels. Eventually, these guys are going to get hurt. Trout's going to be on the injured list at some point. We're going to see Rendon on the injured list. But if there's a time where we're going to get the peak Angels, it's in the first month or two of the season. So I'm going to be backing the Angels as a little bit of a contrarian offense here. Will you?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Kluber, you mentioned 2.36 ERA, but a 3.87 xERA. So definitely a regression candidate. I feel like a broken record because like all these guys have great ERAs and average-ish xERAs, but it doesn't change the fact that it's true, right? Like Corey Kluber was just average last year with the Yankees. I know that the Rays are probably the smartest organization in baseball, so clearly they saw something with him, but I would be shocked if he finished the year with a sub-3 ERA. So, yeah, against an offense like the Angels, why not? Let's take some shots.
Yeah, and then when it comes to Kluber as a pitcher, once again, he's had some success this year. I'm not going to be interested in him in this spot. I think there are times to roster pitchers against the Angels, mostly because as much as the Angels' offense has improved this year, they strike out a ton. I just don't think Corey Kluber is the pitcher to take advantage of that.
Agreed.
And then on the other side, we have Reed Detmers starting for the Angels. Now, Detmers is one of the best pitching prospects in all of baseball. He is outstanding stuff, but it's yet to really lead to great big league results. And so Detmers, once again, his numbers are not horrific this year. Relative to other pitchers on the slate, he does have a 4.28 expected ERA, which is, I don't know, like fifth worst on the entire slate, which is ridiculous for a slate of this size. But either way, Detmers has not quite been able to find success at the big league level. His minor league numbers were outstanding. Last year in Double-A, he had a 3.27 FIP. His strikeout rate was crazy. He struck out 43.1% of the hitters he faced. So there could be a point in time where Reed Detmers starts to find more success, but I kind of want to see it first. And he hasn't been working super deep into games. 5 starts this year, 22 innings pitched. So Detmers against the Rays, it's not a spot that I'm looking to get to, but are you looking to stack the Rays against him at all?
Yeah, I'll have some Rays today. They are grading out with negative leverage, but I think we're just hurting to find offenses to load up on that aren't, super popular. I think that the Rays kind of fit the description here. They've been really good against right-handed pitching. They're 5th in WRC plus. I think, oh no, I'm sorry. Detmers is a lefty.
Yeah.
That might change my opinion here. They're 4th in WRC plus against left-handers. Same thing. Fire up the Rays. They're a good offensive team. And I think that, again, on a slate where we're kind of hurting for offense, they stand out as a team that makes some sense.
Yeah, and let me count. So we have how many pitchers on the slate have an expected ERA over 4? We have Patrick Corbin, Yusei Kikuchi, Kyle Bradish, Cal Quantrill, Reed Detmers, and Antonio Sensella. That's it. That is not a lot for a slate with 12 games on it. So once again, to back up what you said there with Reed Detmers, I don't think that he's some pitcher we normally be looking to be like, oh, I need a target against this guy. But kind of all the pitchers that we're seeing on every slate have had some sort of success, and he hasn't really been one of them. So I don't mind getting to the Rays to some extent tonight. Next spot here to talk about, Philadelphia Phillies against the Seattle Mariners, getting more into these West Coast games. Now, 2 pitchers this year that at least coming into the year, we would have expected to be 2 of the better pitchers in baseball. Well, maybe not with Robbie Ray, but we'll talk about that in a second. But Aaron Nola's produced excellent results so far this year, 31.1% K rate, 2.59 expected ERA, 0.87 whip. And then Robbie Ray, massive regression for him to this point relative to last year with a 20.3% K rate, 3.72 expected ERA. We'll talk about him more in a second. But first, I want to talk about Nola because I view him as one of the best pitching options on the entire slate. I know he's going to be chalk, but I think it's more than warranted considering the success he's had this year, the strikeout stuff, and that at least on DK, he's only 8,900. I think that makes for a really strong SP2. FanDuel, single pitcher site where he's 9,700. He's still fine, but not quite the same priority he is where he's only 8,900 on DK. And we need a roster 2 pitchers. I'm going to be really high on Nola today. Will you?
Yeah, another pitcher who, or one of the few pitchers who doesn't seem like a regression candidate. If anything, he's probably a progression candidate because his big struggle has been keeping the ball in the ballpark, which every pitcher has done this year. So you would expect him to improve in that department moving forward. But the strikeout numbers are good. Everything else about him seems pretty solid. So if he can get that home run rate back down near his career norm, he's a 14% home run per fly ball rate for his career. He's up over 21% this season. If he can get that back under control, I expect him to have a really strong year. So yes, I like him against the Mariners.
All right, so we're on the same page with that. And then as for Seattle, not an offense I'm going to be looking to stack against. I assume you're on the same page there?
Yeah.
All right, so now let's do the Robbie Ray conversation because I know you were kind of on the same boat as me last year. We were like, we don't really buy into this Robbie Ray success. And ultimately, he ended up having a really solid season. I think there was a lot of luck involved. This year, though, is such a weird year because it's a totally different Robbie Ray than we've ever seen in the past. The big difference is he isn't generating strikeouts this year, which even when we've seen Ray struggle in the past, he's always been a guy that could generate strikeouts. There are some red flags, most notably for me. 94.6 average fastball velocity last year. This year down to 93.2. And I'm starting to think that this is just a result of wear and tear. He's over 30 years old now. Last year was the most innings he's ever pitched in a single season. And I think that has to contribute to the decreased strikeout rate and the decreased velocity, at least in some extent. So I think that Robbie Ray is going to be better from a strikeout perspective going forward. But at least for this slate where we have a lot of pitching options to get to, I'm going to want to be underweight to a 30% on Robbie Ray because the strikeout stuff hasn't been there. I think the Phillies have a good offense. Actually, if anything, I don't mind the Phillies as a contrarian.
I was going to say that. Yeah.
just because Robbie Ray, it's just such weird results for him so far this year, and the velocity's down. I wonder if there's an underlying injury we don't know about, because just a 20.3% carry for Robbie Ray, it's so much different than anything we've ever seen. What do you make of his early season struggles?
It's bizarre. I mean, like you said, the one thing you could always count on with Robbie Ray was strikeouts. He might walk the ballpark. He might allow a gajillion home runs, but he was always going to strike dudes out. And that's just not the case so far this season. So I think this Phillies offense, even though they've been just kind of average to start the year, you look at the names in this group and it is absolutely loaded, at least until you get to the bottom. They are pricey. That's the only thing that I will say. Bryce is 5,800, Schwarber is 5,700, and those are both lefties up against Robbie Ray. Real Muto, Castellanos. Rhys Hoskins is probably the guy that stands out the most to me at 4K. He did homer yesterday. He's a guy that can do some damage against left-handed pitching. So I think that they're an interesting offense for me, for sure. I just don't know exactly which pieces to go with. Like, do you want to include one of the lefties? Do you want to maybe go with an all righty stack and kind of maybe it will lower your correlation, but you at least get a slightly better matchup from a splits perspective?
I don't mind it just because Robbie Ray has really struggled so far this year. And it's not like he's somebody who in the past hasn't gotten hit by lefties at times. I mean, he has certainly been much worse over the course of his career against right-handed hitters than left-handed hitters. But I mean, still just looking through some of his numbers. Let's see, what did he do? I mean, like last year's such an outlier for him that's kind of hard to really put all that much weight into. And this year he's only pitched against 12 lefties the entire year. Teams have just not thrown, he's thrown a total of 4. He's gotten 12 outs against left-handed hitters this year. So he just hasn't seen all that much of them. I'm fine. Going to guys like Bryce Harper, I don't think that's too problematic for me. Like, I'm willing to roster him against any pitcher that I think we could take advantage of.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. But again, I'm probably prioritizing the right-handed guys if I'm just going with one-offs.
Yep, that totally makes sense to me as well. And then as for Robbie Ray, 30% expected ownership on this slate. Maybe we could say he's a little bit underpriced on DK 8,300 based on the success he had last year, but that's going to be somebody that I'm looking to be underweight to the field on. I don't buy into what Robbie Ray did last year. And then on FanDuel, where he's at 8,800, I don't have interest in rostering on a single pitcher site where he's 8,800 in this matchup against the Philadelphia Phillies. Moving on, we've got a few games left here to talk about. The Arizona Diamondbacks against the Miami Marlins. And I want to start by talking about Miami because this is the chalk offense of the slate against Madison Bumgarner. Now, I'm not a Madison Bumgarner believer at all. I don't think he's reformed himself after. I mean, it's been the last time Madison Bumgarner had a quality big league year was 2017. And since then, he's been in a motorcycle accident. He's seen a significant decrease in velocity. There's nothing that indicates to me that all of a sudden Madison Bumgarner has gotten better, and he only has a 15.3% K rate. But with the dead ball so far this year, he has found ways to be successful. He's a 3.52 expected ERA. Here's the deal with the Marlins. I do like stacking against Madison Bumgarner in general, but this is a massive slate, and I just don't think I have that much of a need to play a team like the Marlins when they're projected for 14% ownership on DraftKings. They're just by far the most popular team on the slate. And then over on FanDuel as well, they're projected for quite a bit of ownership at 10%. So I understand wanting to stack against Bumgarner. I just think there's better spots to get to relative to ownership. So I know also something you and I have talked about for in the past when it comes to Madison Bumgarner. You're not a fan of him either at this point in his career, but the Marlins don't have a great offense. I don't really want to play them as chalk in pretty much any spot.
Yeah, I feel kind of similarly to them as how I felt about the Cardinals, right? Like, it's just not a good enough offense for me to get excited regardless of who they're facing. They have the highest strikeout rate in the league against left-handed pitchers this season. They are 23rd in WRC plus against left-handed pitching. So there's virtually no situation where I'm going to be interested in the Marlins as a chalk team. I understand their team total is one of the better marks on the slate. They're pretty affordable, all things considered, but it's just a no for me anytime they're going to be chalk.
Yeah, I think we're definitely on the same page there. Like, I don't think it's a bad spot for them. It's just the ownership is more than what's warranted. But where I think we are going to have interest in the Marlins is both you and me. I assume we're going to be on this. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think we're going to be on the same page here. Starting for the Marlins, Jesus Luzardo. You liked him in his last start as contrarian play. I believe it was against the Padres, if I'm not mistaken. You and I did a show together for that slate. And Luzardo pitched really well today. 33.3% K rate, 2.75 expected ERA, 1.06 whip. If I'm not mistaken, you're a Luzardo guy, right?
I am all about the Jesus Lizard.
Yeah, there we go.
I love this man. And I'm happy to see that he is working out for the Fish. Just striking out absolutely everything so far this season. He had a 12 strikeout performance already versus the Angels in his, I believe that was his first start of the year. But yeah, he's a good pitcher. He's been a good pitcher, or he was at least always considered a good pitching prospect. The results haven't always been there, but the arm talent is undeniable. The guy has nasty stuff. And I think this matchup here against the Diamondbacks is clearly a good one. The Diamondbacks are just a dreadful hitting team. I mean, they have a 186 batting average against left-handed pitchers this season, a 66 WRC plus. They don't strike out a ton, so I guess that's a positive that they have going for themselves, but they just can't hit. They can't hit at all. So yes, give me the Jesus Lizard all day.
Especially at low ownership. Neither FanDuel nor DK is he projected for significant ownership. I mean, we're looking at, like 2 and 4% ownership for him across the two sites. So I really like Luzardo as a contrarian pitching option. And once again, earlier when I was talking about when pitchers have increased success and in smaller sample size, I'm looking for what is something we could point to that's a tangible difference. And we have some with Luzardo as well. First of all, he is throwing really, really hard this year. His average fastball velocity is 97.2 miles per hour. That is up 1.5 miles per hour from last year. And then in terms of his pitch mix, he's kind of gotten away from using his changeup as much, just being like, I'm a slider guy now. He's throwing his slider 41% of the time, and just guys cannot hit the pitch. So I think this is something that we could really look at as positive when it comes to him, is he's found something that works for him. He's like, the changeup, he mixes in. It's not like he's only a 2-pitch pitcher. But he said that, my slider is my best secondary pitch. And instead of in the past where it was like he threw his changeup and slider equal, he's like, I'm going to cut in half the amount of time I throw the changeup, and I'm going to double the amount I throw the slider. And that's really led to increased success, especially when paired with the increased fastball velocity. So I think Luzardo, another really strong contrarian pitching option when he's going up against a pretty weak Arizona Diamondbacks offense. 2 games left to talk about: San Diego Padres, Chicago Cubs. Mike Clevinger is on the mound for San Diego. We haven't seen all that much of him yet this year, although what we have seen, he's a 1.86 expected ERA, so successful like pretty much every other pitcher in baseball. And then for the Cubs, Wade Miley making his season debut. We have not seen Wade Miley pitch at all this year. Wade Miley, I've never really totally bought into some of the success Miley's had in recent years. But if there's anybody that I think is really well set up to pitch well in just a dead ball era as a guy who throws strikes, doesn't really walk a lot of guys, and is just going to allow contact, I kind of think this is a season that's suited pretty well for Wade Miley. Now, with that said, there's a lot of variance added to the mix because we haven't seen him pitch at all at the major league level. Let me bring up his minor league stats to see what he was doing down there, at least to get an idea for how stretched out he is. So first start of the year for Wade Miley, he's made 1 minor league start, and he only pitched 4 innings there. So I don't know what we're getting out of Wade Miley, but what do you look at when it comes to Wade Miley in the matchup against the Padres? And we just don't have any data on him this year.
I think I will be playing the Padres more than I will be playing Wade Miley.
Yeah,
the Padres offense, yeah, they've been pretty good against left-handed pitching. They're 9th in WRC plus. Even without Tatis, they have some guys in their lineup who can do damage. I mean, Machado might be the MVP through this point in the season. So, I again, Wade Miley is not somebody that should intimidate you. I think, as you mentioned, the ball might suit him as a guy who does like to put the ball or keeps the ball in play, but he's got to be considered one of the weaker starters on today's slate.
Yeah, for sure. Especially because he only went 4 innings in his last minor league outing. Then Something else when it comes to that minor league outing is because we don't have a pitch count for that start. So we don't know, is he just super efficient? Because knowing Wade Miley, he didn't strike guys out in that start in the minor leagues. This might have been a thing where he might have gone 4 innings and threw 50 pitches and made it out of that. So I don't think he's going to go super deep into the game. I think it's worth taking shots on the Padres offense just because we have no clue what we're getting out of Miley in this spot. We could kind of say some of the same things about Clevenger. The difference is I'm almost never willing to take that many shots on the Cubs offense, especially because Seiya Suzuki is hurt. So Suzuki has been a really strong hitter so far and is by far the leading candidate to win the National League Rookie of the Year. But he hurt his ankle last night, so I assume he's not going to play today. Mike Clevenger's only made 1 start this year. He pitched 4 2/3 innings, so I don't think he's going to go super deep into the game. The matchup looks good, but I just can't trust Clevenger to go all that deep, and we haven't seen him pitch at all recently. So 2020 and before that, he was looking like one of the better pitchers in the American League. Gets traded to the Padres, hurts his elbow, undergoes Tommy John surgery. So we haven't seen him pitch for a year and a half. He's only pitched 4 innings. I don't want to roster the Cubs without Seiya Suzuki, but I'm not really looking to roster Clevenger much after a long layoff. How are you viewing Clevenger in this spot?
Yeah, I'll have some Clevenger just because it's hard to find pitchers that are this cheap with upside. Like he's in the same ballpark price wise as Yusei Kikuchi and Madison Bumgarner, and clearly I think he's better than those guys. But I will probably be underweight to the field. We give him a decent chance at being a top 2 value on this slate, but not much of a chance of being a top 2 pitcher overall, or not a great chance, I should say. So I think he's somebody to have some exposure to, just because, again, sub 7K, if you wanted to go with an expensive lineup like the Blue Jays, like he would be somebody to consider as an SP2. But I clearly there's not a ton of ceiling there.
Yeah, and I mean, if I do have to say one thing, even though he didn't go deep in the game, he only threw 95 pitches last time out. Teams are really weird when it comes to pitch count and innings. Some teams would be like, hey, this guy can't throw more than 5 innings. You'd be like, all right, but isn't the amount of pitches somebody throws more important than the innings? But some teams really don't feel it that way. They look at it as how many times, how high stress were the innings? How often did he have to get up and warm up and then sit down and cool off?
Downs.
So,
the Mets manager last year talked about up downs. We didn't want him to have too many up downs. You can get like standing up is a strain on a pitcher's body.
These guys are professional athletes. They're good at everything, but hey, they stand up and down too many times. They don't want to overexert them. But yeah, it's Clevenger. I agree with your point in terms of him he's cheap enough where you could consider him as an SP2, but a low priority option. Ultimately, I don't think I'm really going to end up getting to him, and not looking to roster the Cubs either. Now let's hit on the final game of the slate. And here is a nice little treat for us because Antonio Senzatella has maybe been the worst pitcher in baseball to this point this season. And once again, I've mentioned how many pitchers that have had success. We only have a few guys we could look at that have an expected ERA even above 4, even a few guys only with an expected ERA over 3.5 on this slate. Antonio Senzatella, 6.4% K rate, 6.66 expected ERA. I understand he makes a lot of his starts at Coors Field, but these are abysmal numbers no matter how you slice it. Antonio Senzatella is not getting anybody out. We have a fairly potent offense in the San Francisco Giants. It's a pitcher's park for sure, but I don't think that's going to prevent me from rostering an offense against one of the worst pitchers in baseball. So give me I almost called them the 49ers. Give me Giant stacks today. Will you be backing them as well?
Yes, 100%. Because you look at Senzatella too, he's actually been better at home this season. I mean, he's only made 1 start on the road, but he allowed 5 runs over 5 innings. He gave up a homer in that start. So I think Senzatella clearly one of the worst starters on this slate. And the Giants offense, we know that they can do some damage. They haven't been quite as potent this year, especially from a power perspective, but they're still 10th in WRC plus against right-handed pitchers. So yeah, I think the Giants are one of your better offenses today.
And then another thing too, when it comes to Senzatella, in the past, he kind of limited the production of offenses, even in bad starts, just because he's such a heavy ground ball pitcher. He is not getting balls in the ground against him at all this year. Last year, he had a 51.2% ground ball rate. It's over 50% for his career. So far this year, 38.7%. Something is wrong with Antonio Senzatella. And not that he's ever been a great pitcher in the past, but once again, there's been times that he's kind of been okay-ish. This year, he's the lowest soft contact percentage of his entire career at 11.5%. The ball's getting hit in the air against him more. He is simply not pitching well. So he's a guy I want to pick on. I'm going to be rostering the Giants offense. One thing to point out is keep note on the status of Brandon Belt. He was a late scratch in last night's game. He also missed some time last week. So I'm not exactly sure where his health is at, but we should have the Giants lineup well in advance to this spot. It's a team I'm looking to stack. On the other side, Alex Wood is starting against the Colorado Rockies. Wood also doesn't have great numbers this year with a 4.66 expected ERA, but he's generating strikeouts. He's at home in a pitcher's park. The Rockies offense is miserable generally when they're taken out of Coors Field. So Alex Wood, I'm willing to overlook some of his mediocre results this year. He's $8,200 on FanDuel. On DK, he's $8,100. I think he's serviceable as a cheap pitching option, even if he isn't a high priority for me. Are you going to be getting to Wood?
I'll have some. I think he's kind of just a meh option today, right? The Rockies have been much better against left-handed pitching than they have against right-handed pitching this season. I overlooked some of their numbers against lefties yesterday because they were taking on Carlos Rodon, who I think is just an absolute stud. I don't feel the same way about Alex Wood. So I'll have some, but I imagine that I'm going to be underweight to the field since Wood is grading out as a somewhat popular option today.
All right. And that is going to do it for us. Guys, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Don't forget to check out all the rest of the content today. We've got MLB Live Before Lock, the NBA Deeper Dive, NBA Live Before Lock. I'll be on that. So check out all of that. Most importantly, good luck. See you guys later.